Have you ever ignored the most important moment of your life to help a complete stranger, only to discover that single act of kindness would decide your entire fate? Because the morning I stopped to help a broken old man in a wheelchair was the same morning my sister tried to erase me from existence. The Manhattan summer was unforgiving that day. The sun pressed down on the city like a heavy hand, baking the gray concrete until the air itself felt thick, almost unbreathable. Sweat clung to my skin as I pushed a wheelchair through a maze of mud, steel barriers, and open trenches created by an aggressive construction site that seemed determined to swallow the sidewalk whole. My name is Joanna. I'm 30 years old, a custom tailor from Brooklyn, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been about stitching together other people's needs while quietly setting my own dreams aside. That morning was supposed to change everything. In less than an hour, I was due at a high-stakes inheritance meeting, one that would determine whether I would have a home or become legally homeless, whether my parents' lifetime of sacrifice would protect me or be weaponized against me. I was already late. That's when I saw him. An elderly man sat stranded at the edge of the construction zone, his wheelchair wedged dangerously between cracked concrete and a deep trench filled with muddy water. Jackhammers screamed nearby, workers shouted, people rushed past him without slowing down, eyes forward, headphones in, pretending they hadn't seen a human life hanging by a thread. He looked impossibly fragile against the towering steel beams behind him. I hesitated. Every rational thought screamed at me to keep moving. This meeting wasn't optional. It wasn't reschedulable. It was my last chance. But then the man looked up at me. His hands trembled on the wheels. His face was flushed with effort and fear. And in that moment, all I could see was my father during his final months, weak, dignified, and utterly dependent on the mercy of others. I dropped my folder and ran toward him. "Please don't move," I called out. "You could tip over." I grabbed the handles of his wheelchair and strained with everything I had, lifting the front wheels free from the concrete trap. My arms burned. My shoes sank into the mud. My carefully pressed navy dress was instantly ruined. The man stared at me as if I had done something extraordinary. "You're clearly in a hurry," he said, his voice raspy but steady. "So why would a well-dressed young woman risk herself for someone who can offer her nothing?" I caught my breath and answered without thinking, "Because some things matter more than money, even today." Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. Then he smiled, a slow, knowing smile that didn't quite match the frailty of his body. He said, "My name is Edgar, and you've just reminded me of something important." 15 minutes later, I was lifting Edgar and his heavy wheelchair up the steep steps of the last city bus heading towards Manhattan's legal district. The bus was overcrowded, suffocating, and completely indifferent to our struggle. I stood beside him the entire ride, bracing his chair every time the driver slammed the brakes. My shoulders screamed in protest, sweat soaked my collar, but Edgar watched me with quiet gratitude, as if he were memorizing something about me. As the bus rattled forward, he began to talk. He spoke of years spent serving a powerful family, of children raised in privilege, some kind, others consumed by entitlement. He spoke of loyalty, betrayal, and the slow rot of greed. "You can always tell who someone really is," he said softly, "when money is involved." His words felt uncomfortably precise. I told him about my parents, about my mother's illness, about the nights I stayed awake changing bandages while my sister Martha sent texts instead of showing up. He listened, truly listened. "Your father sounds like a man who believed character mattered more than titles," Edgar said. "Those men plan further ahead than people realize." Before I could ask what he meant, the bus lurched to a stop. We were there. The glass tower of the law firm rose above us like a monument to power, cold, reflective, intimidating. I bought Edgar water with my last few dollars and wiped the mud from his sleeves with my silk handkerchief. I wanted him to feel respected, even here. That's when the clicking heels announced her arrival. Martha stepped out of the elevator like she owned the building. Designer suit, perfect hair, a scent that screamed money. When her eyes landed on me, standing beside an old man in a battered wheelchair, her lips curled with disgust. "Unbelievable," she laughed loudly. "I told you not to embarrass me today." Her gaze slid to Edgar like he was trash on the marble floor. "And now you've brought a beggar." She snatched the water from my hand and dumped it on my shoes. "You can afford charity, but not dignity." I froze. Before I could speak, Edgar calmly looked at her. A person who measures their worth by the price of their shoes is usually standing on very unstable ground. The lobby went silent. Martha's face flushed with rage. Security was called. Flynn, her lawyer, stepped close, whispering threats about forged documents and lawsuits that would erase me from this city. And through it all, Edgar said nothing. He only watched. 30 minutes later, inside the VIP conference room, Flynn laid out a forged will. Martha smiled as she offered me $5,000 to disappear. My hand shook as I reached for the pen. That's when Edgar raised his hand. And everything changed. The pen hovered inches over the paper. I could feel the weight of every sleepless night, every stitch sewn by hand, every moment I chose duty over ambition pressing down on my fingers. My sister sat across from me with the confidence of someone who believed the ending was already written. Flynn watched like a predator waiting for the final twitch. Then Edgar raised his hand. "Stop." The single word cut through the room with a force that felt almost physical. Flynn scoffed, irritation flashing across his face. "Sir, with all due respect, this is a private legal proceeding. You are not—" "I am exactly who needs to be here," Edgar replied calmly. He reached into the inner pocket of his worn jacket, the same jacket Martha had mocked not 30 minutes ago, and withdrew a badge. Not flashy, not dramatic, but unmistakably official. The seal glinted under the fluorescent lights, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Flynn's face drained of color. Martha's smirk cracked. "I am Edgar Whitmore, senior legal custodian and confidential executor for the Flynn family estate, appointed directly by your parents." The room fell into stunned silence. From his battered briefcase, Edgar removed a pristine folder, thick, carefully preserved, and sealed with a notarized ribbon. He placed it on the table with quiet authority. "The document you're presenting," Edgar nodded towards Flynn's papers, "is a forgery. Poorly done, I might add." Martha stood to her feet. "That's a lie. You're a fraud. Some kind of con artist she picked up on the street." Edgar didn't even look at her. "This," he said, opening the folder, "is the original will. Signed, witnessed, sealed, and deliberately hidden." My breath caught in my throat. Flynn stammered, "Mr. Whitmore, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Edgar interrupted. "I've been understanding situations like this for 40 years. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. Your father's words filled the room, not as ink on paper, but as a living presence. He had anticipated everything. He had foreseen Martha's impatience, her resentment, her belief that money equaled worth. And buried deep within the will was a clause so precise, so devastating, that I felt my knees weaken as Edgar spoke it aloud. Any beneficiary who engages in deception, coercion, or the mistreatment of a direct family member shall be immediately disqualified from all claims to the estate. Martha's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Edgar continued. Further, all verbal interactions relevant to the execution of this will are subject to evidentiary review. He tapped the side of his briefcase. I recorded everything. The lobby insults, the threats, the bribe, the attempted eviction, every cruel word Martha had unleashed, captured, time-stamped, undeniable. This is impossible, Martha whispered, backing away from the table. "I was supposed to win. I did everything right." Edgar finally looked at her. "You did everything greedily." Flynn's hands trembled as he gathered his papers. "This meeting is adjourned. We'll need time to—" "You'll need a lawyer," Edgar corrected. "And a very good one." He turned to me. "Joanna, your father named you sole executor and rightful owner of all assets, effective immediately." The words didn't feel real. Martha collapsed to the floor, sobbing, begging, promising change. Security escorted her out, the same security she had tried to weaponize against a stranger. Flynn avoided eye contact as Edgar calmly informed him of the formal complaint already filed with the state bar. When the doors finally closed, Edgar turned to me. "Your father trusted kindness more than blood. Today, that trust paid off." As we stepped back into the sunlight, for a long moment after the doors closed behind Martha and Flynn, no one spoke. The silence inside the conference room was so complete it felt unreal, like the aftermath of an earthquake when the dust hasn't settled yet, and everyone is afraid to move in case the ground shifts again. I was still standing, my hands resting on the back of the chair I had never sat in, my legs trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. The papers on the table, my papers, looked ordinary, but they carried the weight of an entire lifetime. Edgar remained seated, calm and composed, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. "You don't need to rush," he said gently, noticing the way I was gripping the chair. "Shock has a way of making victories feel unreal." I exhaled slowly, pressing my palm against my chest. "I keep expecting someone to tell me this is a mistake," I admitted, "or that I misunderstood something." Edgar smiled faintly. "Your parents were meticulous people. They didn't leave room for misunderstanding." He slid the original will toward me. "Take your time. Read it." My fingers trembled as I opened the document. My father's handwriting leapt off the page, precise, familiar, comforting. As I read, memories flooded back. His quiet encouragement when I chose tailoring over finance. My mother's soft smile whenever I repaired something instead of replacing it. They had seen me, not as the failed seamstress Martha loved to mock, but as their daughter. Tears blurred the ink. I didn't know. I didn't know they trusted me this much. "They trusted you because you showed up, when it mattered." A soft knock interrupted us. One of the firm's senior partners entered, his tone suddenly respectful, almost deferential. "Miss Joanna, the transfer documents are being prepared. Everything will be executed today." Today. The word echoed in my mind. Not someday, not after appeals, not once Martha calmed down. Today. When we finally exited the building, the air outside felt cleaner, cooler, as if Manhattan itself had exhaled. Martha was gone, Flynn was gone, the crowd had moved on, but justice lingered. Edgar walked with me to the curb, his posture no longer frail, no longer uncertain. He seemed taller somehow, steadier. "I owe you my life today," he said quietly. I shook my head. "You owe me nothing. I just did what anyone should do." He looked at me thoughtfully. "Most people don't." His driver opened the car door. Before getting in, Edgar turned back one last time. "Your parents asked me to watch from a distance, to step in only if necessary." I swallowed. "You were testing me." "I was observing you," he corrected. "There's a difference." The car pulled away, disappearing into traffic, and for the first time since my parents died, I felt steady. That evening, I returned to the penthouse. My penthouse. The door opened to silence, heavy, echoing, unfamiliar. The place still smelled faintly of my mother's perfume. Martha's absence felt louder than her presence ever had. I walked through each room slowly, touching furniture, walls, door frames. This wasn't about ownership. It was about memory. I found my old tailoring machine in the spare room, exactly where Martha had left it before trying to throw it out. I sat beside it and cried. Not out of pain this time, but release. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Edgar. Flynn's license has been suspended pending investigation, he said matter-of-factly. Martha attempted to contest the will. It was dismissed within minutes. I closed my eyes. What happens to her now? I asked. That, Edgar replied calmly, is up to her. Justice handled its part. I hung up and looked around my tailor shop, still cluttered with fabric, patterns, unfinished dreams. Then I smiled. Because now, for the first time, I wasn't surviving. I was choosing. The city did not change overnight. Manhattan still roared with traffic, people still hurried past one another, eyes fixed on phones and destinations. Wealth still glittered behind glass walls. But something inside me had shifted so completely that the world now felt quieter, less threatening, less desperate. For the first time in my life, I woke up without fear sitting on my chest. I stood at the window of the penthouse as the morning sun spilled across the skyline, painting the buildings in gold. This view had once been Martha's obsession, a symbol of status, power, and superiority. To me, it now felt like a responsibility. Money entered my life suddenly, but purpose arrived even faster. Within a week, I made my first decision as executor of the estate. I did not fire up spreadsheets or call investment managers. Instead, I unlocked my old tailor shop in Brooklyn, rolled up my sleeves, and began sewing again. But this time, not for survival. I expanded the shop into a community workspace, offering free alterations to job seekers, tailoring lessons to single parents, and training programs for women who had been pushed out of traditional careers. The sewing machines hummed late into the night, not with desperation, but with possibility. Word spread. People didn't come because I was wealthy. They came because I listened. Edgar visited once, quietly, without announcement. He watched from the doorway as I helped a young woman prepare for her first interview, adjusting the hem of a borrowed blazer. "You honored them well," he said when I finally noticed him. "I'm trying," I replied. "No," he corrected. "You're succeeding." Martha did not disappear. She tried, briefly, to rebuild her image. Apologies surfaced, public ones, carefully worded, strategically placed. But without money to cushion her fall, the world responded differently. The social circles she once dominated grew silent. Friends stopped calling. Employers stopped trusting. Greed cost her more than inheritance. It exposed her. Months later, I received a letter. It was handwritten, short, unpolished. She didn't ask for money. She asked if I was happy. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Some questions don't need answers. One evening, I returned to the construction site where I had first met Edgar. The sidewalk was repaired now, smooth, safe. I stood there for a long time. That morning felt like a mistake, like a delay, like the wrong choice. But it had been the turning point. Kindness didn't save me because it was noble. It saved me because it revealed who I was when no one was watching. On the anniversary of my parents' passing, I hosted a small gathering at the shop. No speeches, no plaques, just people. People laughing, learning, helping one another. As I locked up that night, I finally understood the gift my parents left behind. Not money, not property, but protection built into a life lived with integrity. If you stayed until the end of the story, thank you. Remember this: kindness is never wasted, justice is never lost, and the quietest choices often shape the loudest futures. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Your voice matters more than you think.